I wrote a somewhat lengthy introduction for this chapter, but I decided to move it to the end of the video so we could jump right into this thing and get to the point. As always, we'll want to avoid general rules whenever possible, in favor of more actual guidelines. We'll also want to continue our tradition of looking at a few examples of what does and does not work when it comes to game development. However, we will not be continuing our tradition of wading around in the kiddie pool. This time, we'll be venturing into the deep end for a bit of a dive, starting with a very puzzling room. For the record, and I want to make this absolutely clear, I'm not picking on Sulaco. I actually happen to like Sulaco, but there's no denying that this section of the game is an excellent example of bad level design. After shooting all these bad guys, we round the corner into this hallway, where we are introduced to the primer barrel for the very first time. We can see that it's sitting up against a wall marked by yellow paint. We prime the barrel and stand back, as it is very clearly about to explode. Now this is all fine so far. The player is simply learning how to use the primer barrels and what the yellow paint means, which is going to be important in just a moment, because upon entering this room, players are presented with a bit of a puzzle. We can see the yellow paint on that wall over there, and we can see the primer barrel up on the shelf. No problem. We'll just shoot the red barrel and retrieve the fallen primer barrel. But as we carry it around, we encounter a bit of a problem when we realize we cannot pick the barrel up high enough to set it on the ledge, nor can we jump while holding it. It's pretty obvious we need to find a way to activate some sort of bridge right here, and in order to do that, we need to have a look around. Now it shouldn't take us long to discover the yellow paint on this locked door over here, and so why not blast our way in there? After all, it looks as though that's what we're supposed to do. Once inside, we find 2 more primer barrels and some switches. One switch opens the primer barrel storage, but the other switch does something rather odd. Players may or may not notice that in addition to activating this server-looking thing, the switch has also opened a small hatch leading into another room. We may as well have a look, and so we jump through the hatch and find an equally puzzling room on the other side. But let's see what's up there. How the hell do we get up there? Let's check this room, shall we? Inside we find a switch that activates some more server-looking things which we can use to bunny hop across to our destination, but I don't like doing it that way. Let's just build a makeshift staircase out of all this rubbish. We'll grab a couple of these garbage can things. We can just throw them over there. We can move them into position next to the plank. We can stack them on top of each other. We'll grab the trunk. The trunk is actually very important. We can take the trunk over there and set it right there, just like that. Now we can jump up there and investigate, and we immediately see another wall with yellow paint. We have another quick look around, and we find the lift controls, so we just need to bring a barrel over here. So we're going to hop down and make our way over here. We find a door. It doesn't give us any trouble. Everything is working out nicely so far, I guess. We grab our little barrel and head back to the lift, making our way back over there. Now you can see why I like to use the garbage to build a staircase. We have to set the barrel next to the lift and jump back up there to activate it. After we activate the lift, we can hop back down again and grab the barrel. Take it up and set it up against the wall, prime it, and get the hell out of the way. The wall has exploded. Now we can make our way inside and investigate this room. Upon doing so, we find a dead guy and a weapon upgrade, and after a bit of snooping, we finally find what we've been looking for, the bridge controls. We throw the switch, and at long last, the bridge descends into position. Very good. Now we'll just have to make our way back over there. But first, we'll have to defend ourselves from imminent danger, as the bad guys have figured out what we're up to, and they've come to stop us. After taking out the first wave, we're quickly assaulted by yet another wave. No problem. We have a gun and some ammo. We got this. We managed to successfully dispatch the goons, somewhat skillfully, if I do say so myself. It might not have looked very skillful, but trust me, there was a lot of skill involved. And now that that's done, we can take our barrel over the bridge and place it against the wall, prime it, and stand back. We have successfully escaped Sulaco's very puzzling room, even if it was a bit convoluted and silly. But that's not the real problem. Let's begin again, because when we deep dive into bad level design, we must be very thorough and attempt to actually demonstrate our point. And so once again, we find ourselves unable to get our barrel across this great divide. To be clear, we are not judging level design based on the difficulty of a puzzle. I'm assuming all that ridiculousness that ensued in the last segment is capable of speaking for itself. As silly as that puzzle was, it's made even worse by the fact that players can simply ignore it by stacking some garbage bins in a row, effectively making their own damn bridge. Now we have accomplished what we needed to without all the hassle, but the poor bastard that programmed that mess of a puzzle did all that work for nothing, and we don't get our weapon upgrade. Now you can make excuses for Altered Orbit if you wish, but you will never convince me that players were intended to have the option of bypassing all that nonsense. I believe it was an oversight, and it's one of the reasons I gave this game a negative review. Now, I honestly do like Sulaco. It's fun to play and it does other things well, even if the level design is somewhat odd. This particular room stands out to me because I mentioned in my review that players were forced to stack garbage in order to progress through the game. The developer responded to my review stating that no garbage stacking was necessary for players to progress through the game. Well, technically he said it didn't happen once, and he is correct. It does not happen once. It happens 3 times. Yes, I considered the developer's response a challenge, and I accepted it. Because while I thought we were supposed to stack garbage in this room, as that is how I solved the puzzle on my first playthrough, I played through the game multiple times, revisiting each of the 4 locations where I stacked garbage to make sure that stacking garbage wasn't necessary. But alas, there are 3 occasions where we do in fact have to stack garbage, so the developer was right. My bad. Unless you can get this gate open. I've never found a way to open this gate, and believe me, I looked hard. The only way that I'm aware of getting past it is to stack some garbage and jump across these ledges. And don't try to fucking split hairs with me, man, saying that's not garbage, it's a crate, or those are canisters. Like, just because they're shiny, they're not trash. Don can launch that shit across the room, so we can only assume it's empty. And besides that, no one is using it for anything other than us when we make a rudimentary bridge out of it to get that stupid primer barrel over the gap. This is as close to dumpster diving as we can possibly get, just so we can find some trash and stack it high enough to get through that damn vent. You might be thinking, what's the big deal? I'm a huge proponent of garbage stacking. Sulaco looks like fun to me. Hey man, whatever floats your boat. I wasn't trying to say garbage stacking was inherently bad. I was just saying I would have rather used my datapad to hack open this gate rather than stack garbage to jump over it. That's all. Or maybe we could have hacked the door to Sal's bar instead of sneaking in through a vent. That's just my personality. I want to see more creativity and imagination in modern games, not the same old tired shit. Frankly, keys that need finding and the locked doors that accompany them are a little too cliche for me at this point. But I wouldn't go as far as to call that bad level design. Bad level design is a ridiculously convoluted puzzle that players don't even have to solve unless they really enjoy wasting their time. Because believe me, you don't need that weapon upgrade back there. And hey, the Great Circle isn't perfect either. I'm a huge fan of Machine Games and I love their new Indiana Jones game, but even that one has some questionable level design. After opening the Giant's coffin and retrieving a map, this idiot drives a damn bulldozer through the ceiling. And I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. That's actually really cool. But afterwards, players trek in a giant useless circle just to end up right back here again, having to climb up the wrecked bulldozer to get out of the hole. It's a pointless waste of time just to shoehorn in some extra gameplay, I guess. It's already a 9-hour game if you hustle. There's no need for this kind of shit. I would have rather just gotten on with the story. In spite of that, though, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is just about as close to perfection as I've ever seen in a game. It's got daring adventure, pyramids, guns, puzzles, a whip, lock-picking nuns, and the final boss does the fucking crane kick, dude. How awesome is that? If I had to choose a favorite video game right this second, I would have to pick Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, so don't think I'm just picking on Sulaco. I don't mind trashing Indy when he deserves it. Bad level design is bad level design, whether I like a game or not. Now I know what you're thinking. Trepang 2 is an odd choice for an example of good level design, but there are some hidden gems for those that care to look. As much as I don't like the idea of tutorial levels, Trepang Studios have managed to create one worthy of closer examination. Whether or not this kind of level should even exist is something we'll cover in another chapter, but for now, let's look at what it does right. Because as far as tutorial levels are concerned, Site 14 is exceptional. Trepang Studios have managed to fit everything the player needs to know into this one level. One of the things that always bothered me about Fear was that the damn tutorials bled over into the second mission. After we go through the ridiculous motions of learning to open doors, jump, crouch, and shoot, we are beaten up by the bad guy, watch a few cutscenes, these helicopters are fucking awesome, we zipline into the action, and we are still seeing tutorials. When is it gonna stop? Seriously. Now there's actually a lot to cover when it comes to learning to play Trepang 2. Aside from basic movement, which the game graciously excludes, we need to learn how to use our abilities, the cloaking and focus, the slide, how to turn enemies into grenades, modify our weapons, restore health and armor, etc. What's impressive is how Trepang 2 manages to get all of this out of the way in a single level while making it fun and without being intrusive. Because in addition to all of that, we also learn about high value targets, we see this robot, and find this nifty little gold coin. All of that will be important later. I don't want to dwell on Site 14, except to say the fact that it doesn't seem all that impressive is exactly what makes it so impressive. The level I really want to talk about is the Pandora Institute. I'm going to divide the level into two parts though, and for players that are familiar with the game, this will make perfect sense. I'll refer to everything above ground as Part 1 and everything below ground as Part 2, because a little backstory is in order here. When I first bought Trepang 2, I had no idea what it was. I bought it because I liked the poster, and it was a first-person shooter, which is exactly what I was looking for at the time. After the first hour, I was not very impressed. Site 14 seemed just like any other cheesy tutorial level, and I really wasn't enjoying the combat all that much. The guns all seemed wildly inaccurate, enemies were spamming grenades, and there was just something about the game I didn't like, but I was having trouble figuring out what it was. Later I would discover it was just a combat system and the nade spamming, but once I got comfortable with what the game was trying to do, I fell in love with it, though for a second there I was honestly considering refunding it. That is, until I saw this guy. I was not expecting this. This just seemed to come out of nowhere, like what the fuck is that? I wasn't expecting Trepang 2 to be a horror game or have monsters in it, but even though this was intriguing and made me want to keep playing, that's not why I decided to keep it. I decided to keep it because the movement was impressive. A skilled player can pull off some pretty cool shit in this game. I'm not even good at it and it's still a lot of fun. But none of this has anything to do with level design, of course. What I'm getting at is that after playing through Site 14 and Part 1 of Pandora Institute, I was ready to uninstall this shit and get my money back, so I certainly never thought I would be sitting here talking about how these two levels are examples of good level design. It was only after hundreds of hours of play that I realized just how good some of these levels really are. And even after I was able to appreciate the first part of the Pandora Institute, it still took some time before I came around to appreciating Part 2. The first half of the level is relatively easy to like, and I think it could grow on just about any player that enjoys first-person shooters. But if you're not into the strange, dark, and mysterious, you might not like what these guys are keeping in the basement. Once players get off this elevator, Trepang 2 goes completely off the rails, and I think that says as much for the overall game design as it does for this one level. Site 14 is pretty mild by any standard, and the first half of Pandora Institute is nothing more than a change of venue. The level is gorgeous, but that doesn't mean anything when it comes to level design. What's important here is that the Institute is laid out in such a way that players traverse smoothly from one arena to the next. It's impossible to get lost and stay lost, and all of the combat arenas are great places to engage in combat, providing players with plenty of opportunities for some thrilling action. And because the level is so easy to navigate, the action only slows down when it's supposed to slow down. The cinematics blend perfectly and never feel as if they're interrupting the gameplay. Instead, they do exactly what they should do, and that is, they elevate and enhance the experience without breaking the immersion. Now, it's not fair to say that makes Trepang 2 better than Sulaco. We're not comparing the two games to see which one is better. Sulaco doesn't feature this kind of cinematic element, and it doesn't have to. It's not that kind of game. The point is that in deciding to use cinematics, Trepang Studios took on the additional responsibility of doing them well, and they have very much met that responsibility. The cinematic elements in Trepang 2 are done very well, and like Fear, most of them occur during the gameplay itself, or blend in so naturally that players hardly even notice them other than to enjoy them. After players are introduced to the level, the cinematics are very subtle. In Part 1, they're nothing more than some door breaches and a couple of helicopter supply drops. Once players get off that elevator, they start to ramp up with perfect timing. The elevator itself is nearly perfect in both form and function, transporting players from one reality to another. Above ground, the Pandora Institute represents a kind of action most players are familiar with. That is, there's really nothing out of the ordinary up there. As players get off the elevator, they can immediately sense that something isn't right. There's very little need for exploration here, as our director instructs us as to what needs to be done, and we are gently guided in the right direction, leading us inexorably toward this fateful introduction. After seeing the Mothman for the first time and being instructed to not engage that subject, yeah, don't worry lady, I hadn't planned on it, players quickly realize that the damn thing went in the direction they need to go, and they have no choice but to follow it. Fuck. This is not only excellent level design, it is fantastic immersion. Players are hit by several different horror elements from this point forward. A jump scare, too, being locked in a room with zombie-looking creatures, thrown down a hole by the Mothman, but these elements aren't just haphazardly thrown in at random. They're carefully placed in order to maintain the pace and atmosphere of the level while having the greatest effect on the player. When the Mothman throws us down the hole, we feel a sense of urgency to get the hell out of there, and we realize we are correct when we suddenly start taking damage from the environment. This kind of anxiety is a lot different than being locked in a room with a bunch of zombies and having to fight our way out, which is a lot different than being locked in a room with a bunch of zombies and having to use them as grenades to accomplish a specific goal. And even when the shit hits the fan, players are still very unlikely to get lost. And while it might seem correct to hurry, we only bring ourselves closer to the final confrontation with the Mothman when we do that. And befitting the rest of the level, the boss battle does exactly what it should. It locks the player in an arena with a dangerous and scary monster, forcing them to fight their way out. And after having successfully done so, players hear the words they didn't really want to hear when the director informs us that shit like this is why we do what we do, implying there will be more of these creatures in the very near future. It should be pretty obvious by now that the Fixing Modern Gaming series is not meant to be expert advice. These videos are only the opinion and suggestions of a grumpy old gamer. Having no training or experience when it comes to game development, I can only offer some common sense solutions to modern problems. Suggestions such as giving players the option to customize their gaming experience or take the writing seriously and pay attention to what's happening in your cinematics, because even an untrained layperson can tell when a game is low quality, and gamers are usually pretty good at identifying the underlying cause. And many of the ideas presented in this series come from years of listening to what other gamers have to say. They come from watching other gaming channels here on YouTube and reading the comments, as well as watching streamers and participating in chat. These ideas come from gaming publications, Reddit, Discord, and reading game reviews on Steam, GOG, and Xbox Game Pass. I'm certainly not suggesting I speak for the entire gaming community, but I am trying to include as many voices as I can, because it doesn't take a genius to recognize that the rising cost of video games has been accompanied by a very noticeable drop in quality. I hope you enjoyed this look at level design from the perspective of a player, and as always, if you made it this far, happy gaming, and thanks for watching.